Story 1. The Unseen Guest. It was a Thursday night when my parents went away for the weekend. I was 17, home alone for the first time in what felt like forever. At first, I was excited, a whole house to myself. No rules, no schedule. Just the blissful solitude I had always dreamed of. I could eat whatever I wanted, watch movies without anyone judging my choices, and just be alone for once. The first few hours were perfect. The quiet was a comfort. The house, though old and creaky, felt like my sanctuary. I tried to ignore the eerie sense that something about it felt different. It wasn't anything obvious. The walls seemed to hum with an odd stillness, the air thicker than usual. But I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the loneliness of being alone. Around 10 p.m., I was lounging on the couch, flipping through Netflix, when I heard it. A soft knock. I paused, staring at the screen. Did I hear that? I turned off the TV, straining my ears. There it was again. 3 knocks. Not loud, not frantic, but slow and deliberate. Like someone testing the door, trying to see if someone was home. I shook my head. It must be the wind, or maybe a tree branch brushing against the door. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and checked the back door. Nothing. I checked the front. Nothing. I even peeked through the peephole, but no one was there. Just empty air and darkness. I told myself to relax. It was probably some kid playing a prank, but the nagging feeling of unease wouldn't leave me. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and tried to distract myself. But the sound continued. Every few minutes, a knock. 3 soft knocks on the back door. This time, I grabbed my phone and dialed my best friend. My voice was shaky when I spoke, trying to convince myself that it was nothing. But she laughed it off, calling me paranoid. You're fine. It's just some random person, probably knocking to see if anyone's home. It's late, they'll go away. But the knocking didn't stop. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every little creak of the house, every rustle of the wind against the windows, made my skin crawl. I felt eyes on me, as if something was watching me from the shadows. I had to check again. My hands trembled as I approached the back door. The knocking was louder this time, more urgent. I opened it, half expecting to see some prankster or a homeless person standing there. But there was no one, just emptiness. I stepped outside, the chill of the night air hitting me like a slap. My breath fogged in front of me as I looked around, every shadow cast by the streetlights seeming to move. Then I heard it again, the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. I ran back inside, locking the door behind me, and double-checked all the windows. I felt like I was losing my mind. This was impossible. I had to be imagining it. But the fear gnawed at my gut. Something was wrong. That night, the knocking didn't stop. It continued, echoing through the house at intervals. Always the same 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, around 2 a.m. I finally decided to call the police. I explained everything, but they just told me to stay inside, lock my doors, and they sent someone over in the morning to check. No one ever came. The knocking continued until sunrise. I didn't sleep a wink, staring at the clock, waiting for the morning light to chase away the terror. The next day, when my parents returned, everything seemed normal again. The knocking had stopped, and the house felt empty in a different way, like it was holding its breath. But when I checked the back door, I found something that stopped my heart. There were wet footprints on the floor. They led to the living room. I never told my parents, but I moved out of that house a few months later. I couldn't stay in a place where something, or someone, was always watching. The house was sold soon after. But I know this, whatever was in there, it didn't just leave. It's still there, waiting for the next person to let it in. Story 2. The Watcher in the Window. It was the second time I'd ever been home alone. The first had been uneventful. Just me, the couch, and Netflix. But the second time I was almost 21, living in a small apartment in the city. My parents had gone to visit relatives, and I had the whole place to myself. I was enjoying the quiet, using it to get some work done, when I first noticed the movement outside my window. It was around 8:30 p.m., and I had just finished making dinner. My apartment was on the second floor, facing a row of similar buildings across the street. As I sipped my drink, I noticed something strange, a figure standing at the edge of the window, staring across at my apartment. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, but when I leaned closer, I realized it was a person. A man, standing perfectly still, gazing right at me. My heart raced. The figure was dark, almost blending with the night sky, but I could see the outline of his face. His eyes seemed wide open, but there was something wrong about them. I couldn't tell if he was staring directly at me or just into space. The longer I stared, the more the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I knew something wasn't right. I tried to calm myself, thinking it was probably someone from the building across the street, but no one had ever stood in that spot before. I pulled the blinds down, trying to shake off the feeling, but as I turned to walk away, I saw it again. Through the slats of the blinds, his face was still there, eyes locked on mine. Panic set in. I didn't know what to do. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend, asking if she could come over. The response was immediate. She was on her way. I felt a small sense of relief, knowing I wouldn't be alone. But when I turned back toward the window, the figure had moved. He was now standing just below my window, staring up at me. His neck craned unnaturally. I couldn't look away. His face was still shadowed, but I could see his mouth moving. Was he whispering something? My heart pounded harder, and I backed away from the window, afraid to move, afraid to blink. A knock at the door broke me from my trance. I rushed to answer, relief flooding me when I saw my friend standing there. She entered quickly, but before I could explain, the doorbell rang again. I froze. I had just locked the door. There was no way anyone could have gotten in. My friend looked at me, confused. "Who's there?" she asked, but I didn't answer. The sound of soft tapping echoed from the window, rhythmic, deliberate. 3 knocks. I didn't want to look, but my friend moved toward the window, pulling back the blinds slightly. "Is someone standing out there?" I gasped. The figure was gone, but there was something else, a shadow, faint but unmistakable, moving across the floor of the apartment. I turned to look at her, but she was frozen, eyes wide. She mouthed something, but no sound came out. It was then that I realized the shadow in my apartment was growing. It was like the figure was standing right next to me, casting his form across the room, looming over us. The phone in my hand buzzed, a message from my mom, asking if I was okay. I looked back at my friend and saw her backing away, her hands trembling. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out now." I didn't wait for anything else. We ran out of the apartment, leaving the door wide open behind us. But even as I ran, I could feel those eyes on my back, watching, waiting. The watcher in the window extended. It was the second time I'd ever been home alone. The first time had been uneventful. Me, the couch, Netflix, and some snacks. But the second time, I was almost 21, living in a small, older apartment in the city. My parents had gone to visit relatives, and I had the whole place to myself for the weekend. I had planned to catch up on some work, enjoy the silence, and just be alone for a while. The apartment wasn't much: 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room that overlooked the street. My apartment was on the second floor, facing a row of similar buildings across the street. It was an area of the city I hadn't gotten used to yet, with its strange mix of old, crumbling structures and newer, modern condos. That evening, after a quiet dinner, I was sitting at the kitchen counter, sipping on my tea, when I noticed something outside the window. It was the middle of the evening, around 8:30 p.m., and the sun had just set, casting the street in a soft glow. But as I glanced out, I saw a figure standing on the corner of the building across the street. At first, I thought it was just someone passing by, but when I looked closer, I saw that the figure was not moving. They were standing perfectly still, facing my apartment. I couldn't make out any details at first, just a dark outline against a dimming sky. But when I leaned forward to get a better look, I felt my heart skip a beat. It was a man. His posture was rigid, like he was frozen in place, and his eyes were locked on my window. There was something about his stillness, something unsettling. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just some guy standing outside, unaware that he was in my line of sight. But as I looked longer, my unease grew. I moved away from the window, trying to shake it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It was as though I could feel his eyes on me, even when I wasn't looking. I tried to focus on my work, but I kept glancing up at the window, only to find that the figure was still standing there. His eyes, I couldn't see them clearly, but I felt them. They were dark, hollow, and unblinking. I pulled the blinds down and tried to distract myself, but my anxiety was mounting. My phone buzzed with a text from a friend, asking if I was okay. I quickly texted back, "Yeah, just a bit of paranoia," trying to make it sound like I wasn't on edge. But something didn't feel right. Around midnight, I decided to turn in. I'd been staring at my phone too much, and my eyes were heavy. The room was dark, and I had a soft light on by the bed. I lay down, hoping sleep would come easily, but my mind kept racing. I kept thinking about that figure outside the window, his stillness, the fact that he hadn't moved once. Then, I heard it. A soft tap, barely audible at first. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes shot open. I froze, listening. The tap was faint, almost too quiet to be real. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, a tree branch brushing against the window, maybe. But when the sound came again, louder this time, I felt my blood run cold. I sat up, my heart pounding, trying to figure out what was happening. I glanced at the window. The blinds were still drawn, but the tap continued. It was like someone was gently knocking on the window. Tap, tap, tap. I couldn't breathe. Slowly, I got up and walked toward the window, my pulse racing. I couldn't see anything through the blinds, but the sound was undeniable. The knuckles against the glass, each tap a little louder, a little closer. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled the blinds up just a little bit, enough to peer through, and there he was. The same man. He was standing directly outside my window now, his face pressed against the glass. His eyes were wide open, staring at me hollow, dark, and empty. His mouth moved, but I couldn't hear anything. His expression was blank, emotionless, but somehow chilling. I stumbled back, my body frozen in terror. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were locked on mine, as if waiting for something. In a panic, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. My voice shook as I explained what was happening, my words stumbling over each other. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, that he was watching me, waiting. When the police finally arrived, they did a sweep of the building and checked the area around my apartment, but they found nothing. No signs of anyone being outside my window. The officer even told me that the streetlights and shadows might have played tricks on me. I wanted to believe that, but as they left, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The man's face. It wasn't just in the window. It was now in the reflection of the hallway mirror, staring back at me. I moved out of that apartment a week later. I couldn't sleep, couldn't shake the image of his eyes, his unblinking stare. The feeling of being watched never left. Even now, when I'm home alone, I can still feel it. The eyes, the hollow, empty gaze. And I wonder, was he real? Or was he something else? Something that knew I was alone and wanted to remind me of that fact. Story 3. The Stranger in the Attic. I had always been a little paranoid about living alone, but I loved my house. It was a bit older, a little quirky, but it was mine. The attic was a space I never really used. It was more of a storage area. I kept it locked tight, but for some reason that made it feel safer. My house was over 100 years old, located on the edge of town. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the rooms had that old house smell, a mix of dust and something deeper, like the house itself was breathing. I loved it, but there was always that nagging feeling of something being wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it. One weekend, my parents went out of town, leaving me alone for a few days. At first, I was excited. A whole weekend to myself. But as the evening drew on, I started feeling uneasy. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a sense that something was off. The house seemed quieter than usual, and every time I moved, the floor creaked beneath my feet. That night, I decided to tackle the attic. I had a few things I needed to store up there, and I figured it would be a good way to pass the time. The attic door was tucked away at the back of the hallway, hidden behind a rickety old closet. The door was locked, as always, but I kept the key hidden under the mat for a reason in case I ever needed it. I grabbed the key and unlocked the door. The stairs creaked as I made my way up into the attic. The air was thick and musty, and as I flicked on the light, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was too quiet up there, too still. The attic was cramped, lined with boxes of old family keepsakes and things I hadn't used in years. I started sorting through the boxes, moving things around, when I heard something, a faint, scraping noise. I froze. The sound was coming from the far corner of the attic. My first instinct was to tell myself it was just a mouse. But the noise wasn't the quick scratching I would expect from an animal. It was slow, deliberate, like something was being dragged across the floor. I held my breath, straining to listen. Then, the sound stopped. For a moment, I thought it was nothing, just the house settling. But as I turned to leave, I heard it again. A soft dragging sound, much closer now. I slowly turned back toward the corner of the attic. The light flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. The sound came again, closer now, too close. It was coming from behind a stack of boxes in the corner. I stepped forward, my heart hammering in my chest. As I reached the corner and moved the boxes aside, I froze. A man was sitting in the dark, his back to me. He was hunched over, almost as if he was too thin. His clothes were ragged, and his hair was matted with something dark. He didn't turn around when I moved the boxes. He didn't even react. He just sat there, hunched, motionless. I gasped, stumbling back, but my legs felt like lead. I couldn't move. My mouth felt dry, and all I could do was stare. He turned his head slowly, too slowly. His face was gaunt, pale, and twisted, with eyes that were too wide, too empty. His lips parted, but no sound came out. I could feel his eyes on me, though they were like voids, sucking the light in. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The only sound in the attic was the slow drip of something water, or something darker falling onto the floor. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. I didn't see him leave, but when I looked back at the corner, the space was empty. Nothing was there. I ran down the stairs, locking the attic door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I tried to convince myself that it was just a bad dream, that my imagination had gotten the best of me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me. The shadows in the house felt alive, like something was waiting. A week later, when my parents returned, I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I left. I moved to a different town, and I've never gone back to that attic. I don't know what I saw that night, but sometimes, when the house is too quiet, I can still hear the sound of something dragging across the floor. And I know, deep down, that whatever it was in the attic isn't gone. It's still waiting for me.